Hey, Peter Franson here. Welcome to part 14 of my commentary for Spirit Blade: A World of Shadows, which we will get started right now. Alright, this scene was originally going to follow the song Running Out of Time, but for more even spacing of songs I put the song elsewhere, but it's the same alarm clock sound that wakes up Merrick here, and it's kind of a callback as it stands in this sequence of things, a callback to Running Out of Time, rather than a song that was going to originally, or a scene that was originally going to grow out of and follow immediately Running Out of Time. During outlining, I had the idea for the Dark One to imitate Merrick, and to just kind of screw over the Liberation, which would have been in place of Legion killing Liberation guys through their family members. And, you know, at that point it would have been 3 for 3 for the Dark One doing his imitation gag. First he fooled Merrick, then he fooled the Sanctafi, you know. He could have made the Liberation look really bad in an unfixable way, so it really would have been a huge problem for the Liberation. But ultimately the idea didn't stick. So now Merrick has to deal with the fact that daily life is not like the mountaintop that he was on. Francisco asks, why does it seem like there are no women seekers that are part of the underground liberation? Francisco Ruiz of the Retro Rewind podcast, thanks for that question. The original concept for the liberation came from Joel 2:28 and Acts 2:17, which say that in the last days your young men shall see visions and your old men will dream dreams, which is why Merrick saw the messenger, why most every liberation member had a vision that called them to the liberation, and why Isaiah, although artificially old, had dreams of the future. Those verses were quoted in the novella, but I decided that these men having visions and dreams would come together, and they'd be bonded by these dreams and these visions. But you know, it was based in that scripture idea. But during the scripting for the audio drama, I wanted to further distance this from being perceived as an end time story. I thought they were very limiting and overdone in Christian fiction, and I felt referring to those verses would muddy the waters a bit, as they're often interpreted as being related to the end times. So that's why we're left with this organization of men without there being a reason for not seeing any women, or maybe they're all just super sexist, if you want to interpret it that way. But there are female seekers all over the world, as was mentioned in Dark Ritual. The male-heavy cast of the Liberation was more of an accident in the adaptation process, and it's one that I certainly regret. It was very hard to cast so many men. Women actors are far more easy to find.
Getting ready to leave, but you were going somewhere first?
Ebony's room.
Okay, so now we're heading to Ebony's room, where she leaves a text message that Ran and Merrick read together. And the fact, you know, having her leave a text message, I felt was in keeping with her character, and it was also done to offload acting duties from Holly to someone else. As I've said before, my wife Holly graciously goes along when I ask for her involvement in these things, despite the fact that she's not an actor, and the whole thing stretches her a lot. So, given that this action of hers is strongly motivated by emotion, I didn't want an audio message from Ebony that would require Holly to do something that she just can't do. That's something I've tried to do in all of my writing in this trilogy. You know, realize what kind of cast I'll be working with, which is mostly those with only hobby theater experience at best, and write in a way that plays to their strengths and avoids their weaknesses. And also try to do that in a way that makes sense in the story, like in this case where Ebony would not want to get in front of a camera or a microphone anyway, given the withdrawn personality for her that we've established throughout the trilogy.
I want to believe the selfless love of Jesu is real, but I've never seen that kind of love for myself, and even you could never forgive me for what I've done. The night you first came to my lips.
So instead, we're getting at the same time, I really like this kind of, the layers here. Through the words, we're hearing and imagining Ebony's emotion as she was writing this.
So badly.
And then at the same time, in the subtext, in Mike Tully's performance, we're hearing how Ran is reacting, you know, to this. So I really like those two layers being in play at once.
I'm going back to the Shada to see if I can make some deals so they'll fix what they've done to me. I know it's a stupid plan, but if they refuse or do something even worse to me, at least I'll be as far from you as possible and unable to mess up your life any more than I have. I know how important today is for you, I wish you and the Liberation all
Really
the
happy
best,
with the
and
score
for
I
your
was able to
sake that everything
find
you
for
believe
this
is really
project. I
true.
feel like since I started the
I'm
trilogy,
so sorry for all that I've done to you.
the licensed music
Ebony,
options that are available have really
I'm
grown
sorry.
quite a bit. I
She
think
took
as
the
more people are
daggers.
just doing independent
Not a
content
good sign.
creation, there's more of a
She'll be
market
headed
for it,
the Shaden
and
Embassy.
they've really improved in
They
quality
have
a lot.
conversion tech there that she'll try to use to teleport to their orbiting ship.
Maybe. Wait a minute, you're not thinking of going after her. Ran, the men are ready, but I can't. We need you today.
No, you don't. But
So now,
she does.
here toward the end of the scene with Rand and Merrick, I snuck in this idea
I'll
that
stay
we
in
don't
touch
have to
over
believe in
comms.
ourselves.
Use the encrypted channel. If anything comes up,
So
you
often
can
we're
still
told to
reach me.
forgive ourselves or believe in ourselves.
You don't have to believe in yourself. Believe in Yezu. He put you here for a reason.
So
Yeah.
see, it's really the
I
antithesis
put you
of
here,
that.
too.
You don't have to believe in yourself.
And I
Believe in
don't.
Yesu. Our view of ourselves is not the one that
Bring her
matters
back.
most, because we aren't the ones who
Thanks,
made
Eric.
the universe and assigned purpose to it. It's God's view of us that matters, because He knows why we were made, and He gave us that purpose.
Attention, men of the
Instead of
Liberation.
forgiving
Finish packing your
ourselves,
gear and assemble
we
at the
find peace
transport
from
bay. We leave for the city in
experiencing,
30
trusting
minutes.
in God's forgiveness of us. Instead of believing ourselves, which can still result in failure in our endeavors, we need to believe in God's purposes for us, and that if we are willing, He will use us in His plans,
Done.
even if the
Should I start
outcome looks
scanning
like
for
failure
Ebony?
to us.
Yes, but
What's the matter?
Okay, and here's the
want to make a
Aya
change
arc
to your
coming to an
program.
end, where he changes
I'd
her
like for you
program,
to delete
takes
all
off the
customization files from the
Ebony
user
personalization.
and revert to
This
the
is what it's been
default
building to,
settings.
this plot
Can I
thread,
ask
and
why?
what I
Because
want
it's
to
not fair
recognize
to
for
Ebony or
myself, and
anyone
what I
else that
want to
invested
help
my
others
heart in a
recognize. You know,
machine
we
instead
might,
of
as
people.
geeks, suck
Yezu
at
was put right in
relationships,
front
but
of
that's still the most
That's not what I
valuable
was
place to
doing.
invest our time and
And it's
energy.
not what you were there for
Loving
either.
God and loving
There's
others
only one
are the
person I'm
command that
interested in
sum
pouring
up
my life into
all
right
commands.
now.
And so
I hear her
Ran
voice,
is dying to his own
want to
desire
know.
to have temporary comfort
sure
with
this
this
is what you
computer
want?
simulation,
Positive.
so that he can
I'm
better
proud of
invest
you,
in a
Ran.
relationship with an actual
Deleting
person.
Customization files.
And if you feel sad for Aya as she willingly allows herself to be reset, that's partially in there to challenge the listener to think about the nature of AI, and then cling to truth despite the emotional impact that an interactive fiction like AI can have on us. I think it's possible that sometime in the next 30 to 40 years we will see people genuinely giving
Public
equal
transport
value
rental
to
activate.
simulated relationships
RCF payment
with
authorization.
interactive
Unlocked.
fiction, which is AI when it's designed to simulate human personality. I think we're going to see people valuing AI in the same way as humans in their interactions with AI. The subject of AI is being treated in fiction all over the place these days, and almost
Destination.
always with the atheistic
Shaden Embassy.
or naturalistic assumption that machines can become just like humans because humans are just fleshy machines with no non-physical component. And I think that's just one more sector of life where we're going to have to learn to prioritize truth over what makes us feel good. We'll see. We'll see if I'm a futurist in that regard. Okay, so we got Holly's voice, my wife, at the beginning here, and naturally it's more of a traditional voice than a pop voice, so I wanted to play to that with her part in this song. So it's a more formal, simple sound. This was originally going to be a song called Can't Do This Without You, a song with a single chorus that could apply whether Ran is singing to God, Ebony is singing to Ran, or Merrick is singing to... I hadn't figured that out yet. But I ditched that idea in favor of a theme on faith. The original hymn text is from "O for a Faith That Will Not Shrink" by Richard Redhead, written in the 1800s. The melody is from a song called Morning Song from Wyeth's Repository of Sacred Music, compiled in the early 1800s. I forgot to credit the melody in the closing credits. Thankfully, it's in the public domain, so I don't think I'll get in trouble. The bridge text is also from "O for a Faith," but the melody there is something that I think I wrote. I think because I scoured my notes and hymnals and couldn't find it anywhere, and I credit it to myself, so I must have felt pretty confident at the time that I wrote it. I'm as sure as I can be that I wrote it. I know I wrote the harmony parts, but it's hard because working on these songs, you know, they become such a part of me, and I become so familiar with them that it's easy to forget for a moment that I didn't write these melodies and lyrics, especially since I didn't grow up singing them like I did more familiar hymns. So if you discover the bridge melody which appears later in some other hymn, let me know and I'll update this commentary with a note. Despite the fact that these lyrics were written over 100 years ago, they really fit thematically with what all three of these characters are going through. This is a moment where each of them are experiencing a test of faith. Ebony sings about foes and poverty, and her career has gone down the tubes and she's about to face the Shada. Ran is so humble and willing to suffer discipline, and his first verse is about not complaining in the midst of that. The back half of each verse section, which Merrick sings, is made up of melody and lyrics that I am positive I wrote, and in more down-to-earth modern language to just kind of distill what all three characters want. They want to believe in what God has said about them and about himself, but they're struggling, and they need help in that. The chorus lyrics and melody are also written by me and were the starting point for this song. I came up with them first, and I later used hymn verses to fill it out and make it complete. The chorus hits on the idea that faith is not blind by default, despite the popular expression that faith is blind. Faith, as described in the Bible, is the decision we make to trust God in light of what he has revealed to be true. And in actuality, the decision not to have faith in God is the choice much more often based in emotion than the decision to have faith in God. We doubt God because of emotions like fear or a desire to please ourselves instead of him. Trusting God often requires that we set aside what we're feeling and cling to what God has revealed, which when examined is found to be actually the most logical and reasonable path. Musically, I wanted to play with the beat and try to do some unexpected things with the percussion. I also took the melody into darker intervals at one point in the composition process, and same with the chord progressions to help avoid sounding like a Britney Spears or an NSYNC song, which earlier versions of the melody kind of sounded like to my ears. With Holly's vocals, which you heard earlier, I repeated some of the similar things I'd done with Tully's voice in Speak to Me, having a separate track that continued a few key notes that she was just passing by. There'd be a separate track that would hold on to that note as she continued moving on with the rest of the melody to kind of give this layered sound to things and just giving a mystical sort of quality. Here's the bridge. Gosh, I haven't listened to this song in a while, and I like it more than I thought I would coming back to it. Rand's last verse foreshadows a little bit to his own death coming up in a few scenes, and again reflects his willingness to give his life for others. This whole song, help my unbelief. I believe, but help my unbelief. That's taken from a story in Mark 9 about a man who brought his son to Jesus to be healed after none of Jesus' disciples could heal him. He said to Jesus, "If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus says, "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." And the father of the child cries out, "I believe, help my unbelief." And that's such a powerful, honest representation of faith that I feel all the time. I believe, and yet there remains a part of me that doesn't. I want to believe, but it's hard. I'm committed to believing, and yet I still have unbelief in me, in the mix. And Jesus still honors and responds to that kind of faith as he did when he healed the man's son. So this song is here both to express where the characters are at internally and to give what I think is a much more biblical representation of faith than we typically hear about in pop culture or even in Christian circles. All right, that's it. Next time, part 15.